now, but we don't know if we'll make it.
Winds strong enough to rip trees from the ground, waves taller than a two-story building crashing into neighborhoods, and an entire peninsula completely cut off from the outside world. On April 12th, one of the most powerful storms to ever target New Zealand's North Island came barreling ashore, and the damage it left behind is staggering. Tropical Cyclone Vianyanu slammed into New Zealand's North Island on Sunday, April 12th, and it did not arrive quietly. This was not some mild weather system that grazed the coastline and moved on. This was a full-scale tropical cyclone making direct landfall, something that New Zealand rarely experiences with this level of intensity. The storm came ashore at approximately 9 in the morning local time, crossing directly over the Makitu Peninsula in the Bay of Plenty region. At the moment of landfall, wind speeds were clocked at a ferocious 150 kilometers per hour. To put that into perspective, that is strong enough to snap power poles, send debris flying through the air like missiles, and turn ordinary objects into genuinely dangerous projectiles. The National Weather Service, known as MetService, took the extraordinary step of classifying this system as life-threatening. They issued what is known as a red-level wind warning, and that designation is not handed out casually. In fact, it is reserved exclusively for the most extreme and dangerous weather events the country can face. When MetService issues a red warning, it essentially means that conditions pose an immediate and serious threat to anyone caught outdoors or in vulnerable structures. This was the kind of storm that demanded respect, and the authorities made absolutely sure the public understood that.
Go on. Oh, watch your feet, mate. That bridge is going. Watch your feet.
We're trying to make it to the bridge right now, but we don't know if we'll make it.
But here is where the situation became truly alarming. The wind was devastating on its own, but the most destructive element of Cyclone Vianyanu was not the wind at all, it was the ocean. Storm surges along the coastline reached extraordinary levels, and the timing could not have been worse. The afternoon high tide window, falling roughly between 2 and 3:30 in the afternoon local time, coincided almost perfectly with the peak intensity of the surge. That meant sea levels rose far above what was already expected from a normal high tide, and the ocean began pushing inland with terrifying force. In the coastal communities of Ohop and Thornton, both situated in the Bay of Plenty region, seawater began encroaching onto land at a rate that left authorities with no choice but to act immediately. 270 households were evacuated as a precautionary measure. 270 families forced to leave their homes, grab what they could carry, and move to higher ground while the ocean crept closer and closer to their doorsteps. Along certain stretches of coastline, wave heights reached an almost unbelievable 6 to 7 meters. Those are waves tall enough to swallow a single-story home. The sheer volume of water being pushed ashore overwhelmed everything in its path. Around the port city of Tauranga, which sits in a low-lying area particularly vulnerable to coastal flooding, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Roads near Fraser Cove and Memorial Park were completely submerged, forcing authorities to close them to all vehicle traffic and establish a security cordon around the affected zones. No one was getting in or out. Emergency Management Minister Mitchell had actually warned residents ahead of time that this exact scenario was likely. He had specifically cautioned that the combination of the afternoon high tide and the massive waves being generated by the cyclone created a compounding risk of severe coastal flooding, and that warning proved to be entirely justified.
Oh, I hope that's all right. There he is.
Now, as bad as the coastal flooding was, there was one area that bore the absolute worst of Cyclone Vanyanu's fury, and that was the Coromandel Peninsula. This region, known for its rugged beauty and relatively remote rural communities, found itself almost completely isolated as the storm tore through. Flooding along Tauranga Valley Road and Blackjack Road was so severe that road access to several rural settlements was entirely severed. These were not minor puddles or manageable detours. The roads were gone, buried under floodwater and debris, and the people living in those communities had no way out. Civil defense authorities responded by issuing a shelter-in-place order, instructing residents to stay exactly where they were, secure their homes as best they could, and wait for conditions to improve. For those families sitting in their homes, listening to the wind howl and the rain hammer against their walls, knowing that no emergency vehicle could reach them even if they needed one, those must have been some of the longest hours of their lives. It was only later in the day, as the floodwaters gradually began to recede, that sections of State Highway 25 were cautiously reopened to traffic, finally restoring some semblance of a connection between the peninsula and the outside world. Inland, the situation was not much better. The sheer volume of rainfall brought by Vianyanu overwhelmed river systems and urban drainage infrastructure across a wide area of the North Island. In the town of Warkworth, situated north of Auckland, the Mahurangi River burst its banks after water levels surged past critical thresholds due to relentless rainfall across the entire watershed. The ground floors of commercial buildings in the town center were submerged, with business owners watching helplessly as muddy floodwater poured through their doors and windows. In the city center of Wakatani, drainage systems simply could not cope with the volume of water pouring from the sky. Storm drains backed up and clogged, creating deep street-level flooding that turned roads into rivers. Municipal crews worked frantically to pump water and set up barricades, but the storm was producing water faster than anyone could move it. Up in the Northland region, the numbers tell their own story. 120 millimeters of rain fell in a single 24-hour period. That is an extraordinary amount of water in a very short time, and it pushed local infrastructure to the breaking point. In the city of Thames, the situation became especially concerning when access roads to the wastewater treatment plant were completely submerged. With crews unable to reach the facility, city officials were forced to implement controlled overflow into local drainage systems. This is essentially a last resort measure, and it came with serious public health implications. Authorities urgently warned residents in the surrounding area to stay completely out of sea and lake waters for at least 2 to 3 days following the heavy rains. Public health officials extended that warning further, advising people against collecting shellfish or any kind of seafood along the southern coastline, stretching all the way from Ohiro Bay down to Breaker Bay. The contamination risk was simply too high. The wind did not just batter buildings and trees, it also went after the power grid. Technical failures cascaded through power transmission lines across the affected regions as sustained winds battered infrastructure that was never designed to withstand this kind of punishment. A joint statement released by Powerco and Vector, two of the region's major energy providers, confirmed that approximately 5,000 households lost power as transmission lines failed, and restoring that power was not a simple matter of flipping a switch. Repair crews could not even begin their work in many areas until the storm had subsided enough to make conditions safe for them to operate. Sending a line crew up a power pole in 150 km/h winds is not just impractical, it is a death sentence. So thousands of families sat in the dark, waiting. In the hours that followed the storm's passage, crews managed to restore electricity to roughly 2,000 of those households, but that still left 3,000 homes without power as night fell. The transportation network across the North Island took an equally severe beating. State Highway 2, one of the major arterial routes in the region, was forced to close along a substantial stretch running from the Wairoa area all the way to Gisborne. Fallen trees near the town of Nuhaka blocked the road from both directions simultaneously, creating a situation where there was simply no way to clear a path quickly enough. A spokesperson for the New Zealand Transport Agency explained that with trees down on both the northern and southern approaches, the safest course of action was to keep the entire stretch closed overnight until daylight allowed crews to properly assess conditions and confirm that it was safe to reopen. Air travel was hit hard as well. Air New Zealand announced the cancellation of flights for more than 90 turboprop aircraft, predominantly those operating out of regional airports scattered across the North Island. These smaller planes, which serve as lifelines connecting smaller communities to the rest of the country, were simply too vulnerable to operate in the conditions Vianyanu had created. The airline did note, however, that its domestic and international mainline jet services were continuing to operate on schedule, providing at least some continuity for travelers.
We're trying to make it to the bridge right now, but we don't know if we'll make it.
Throughout all of this chaos, the people on the front lines were working relentlessly. The New Zealand Fire and Emergency Service responded to more than 100 individual calls for assistance over the course of the day, dealing with everything from wind damage to surface flooding to people trapped in vehicles or structures. Civil defense teams and municipal crews worked alongside them, transporting evacuated residents to designated safe areas, clearing fallen trees from roads, and doing everything in their power to keep people safe while the storm raged around them. As Sunday evening arrived, the worst was finally over. According to MetService, Cyclone Vianyanu was tracking southeastward after passing over the North Island, and the system was expected to pass to the west of the Chatham Islands by Monday. One by one, the heavy rain warnings that had blanketed the region were lifted. By Sunday night, only a handful of strong wind warnings remained in effect, primarily in the Hawke's Bay area, and those were expected to expire overnight. The monster that had paralyzed an entire island was finally moving on. For many New Zealanders, Cyclone Vianyanu stirred painful memories of another storm, one that left scars that have still not fully healed. Cyclone Gabrielle struck the country in 2023, claiming 11 lives and displacing thousands of people from their homes. Gabrielle went down in the record books as one of New Zealand's most devastating natural disasters of the 21st century, a storm that reshaped communities and forced a national conversation about climate resilience and disaster preparedness. The fact that Vianyanu, a storm of comparable ferocity, did not claim a single life is being viewed as a genuinely positive outcome. Officials are cautiously crediting improved warning systems, faster evacuation protocols, and better public awareness for helping prevent fatalities this time around. However, those same officials are also quick to emphasize that the danger is not entirely gone. Until conditions fully return to normal, until floodwaters have completely receded, contaminated waterways have been tested, and damaged infrastructure has been properly inspected, vigilance remains essential. The storm may have passed, but its aftermath still demands caution and care. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.